Hi folks, July 26th, Sunday. Another nice sunny day on Vancouver Island. Trust everyone's fine. Thanks for coming back. If this is your first time, thanks for taking a look. Yesterday I mentioned my dental appointment and I had some people question me on that. And of course, so let me clarify something. We sometimes just jump to a conclusion that we have in our own mind. It wasn't intended. You know, I've been through my years to a lot of dental practices, and the dental practice that I mentioned, I didn't mention it by name, but maybe enough information that people figured out who it was. But that particular dentist is probably the best dentist I've ever been to, and the staff the same way. They're just from the reception to the gals who work in the back, who do cleanings and that sort of thing, the technicians, all really great. They're just the best there is. So it was the systems that I was sort of railing about, the systems. And you know, you have to, it's not so long ago, it's actually 6 months ago, they were deemed a little bit past 6 months, maybe when they sort of put all the lockdowns in place. Dentists were deemed a non-essential service. Now think about that. Now the same bureaucrats and clowns who put that together have probably have a hand in putting together the protocols. And I don't think every dentist is in on their own doing their own protocols. This is probably a blanket thing they're all following. And rules are important if they make sense. But sometimes rules don't make sense. So that's what I'm talking about. And driving in for a coffee this morning, on one of the radio stations, I was interviewing somebody from the federal part of the health organization, saying, buckle in because we're expecting this next wave to be really, really tough, really deadly. And this new normal, as they keep calling it, they indicated could be here for 1.5 years or longer. And so you've just got to sort of think. And I guess a lot of people have short memories, but go back to when most people were just hearing about this back in January. There was all sorts of crazy information coming through. Most people weren't aware of it. They thought it was just all another flu or a cold coming and weren't paying any attention. That was some of our government officials, some of our health officials. And when we stood, I had the advantage of knowing a lady who grew up in Nanjing. And she had some first-hand experience with masks and that sort of thing if there's something crazy happening. And so we had several conversations in those first few days. And when Wuhan got locked down, I mean, there was millions of people, again, besides just Wuhan, almost as many people were in lockdown as the population of Canada. So you know something crazy is going on. And we sort of thought, well, for sure, you should be wearing a mask, you shouldn't be traveling, and all those things that made common sense. And you look at the World Health Organization, all of the experts said masks are a waste of time. They're not going to work. They're more harmful than good. Not a problem traveling because this isn't passed on person to person. It is not aerosol. You don't have to worry about that. Just wash your hands. Don't touch your face. You don't know the lines that went through. Was repeated every 5 minutes on any media. And of course now masks are mandatory in some places. I mean, there's a heat wave going on in some places, and they have to, in some part of Florida, you have to wear a mask in your house. Now, unless they just rescinded that law. So sometimes rules just don't make sense. And if you're going to follow a rule just for the hell of sake, you're going to follow the rule. It's not logical, not sensical. It's nonsensical. Why have that? I mean, that's what happens when you let bureaucratic minds start drawing up lists of what you should or shouldn't do. It's like I'm not sure if you clicked on that link yesterday, the British Columbia Centre for Disease Control. Their idea of how you should, what the pros and cons and what not to do in relationships. And I still smile when I think of that, because you've turned bureaucrats loose. We now have the building code of relationships. Some of it makes sense, some of it makes no sense at all, some of it's nonsensical, and here's the other nonsensical thing. We're going on about this third wave coming. Now think about this. Just sit back and think about this. They're still telling you that if you've got a fever, you've got a headache, if you got a cough, stay home for 14 days and monitor yourself. Stay home and monitor yourself. And if you get sick or you can't have trouble breathing, then call somebody. Now, I mean, that's a recipe for disaster. If they figure that you are sick, why aren't they suggesting you take some zinc, take some maybe a hydroxychloroquine? Doctors are using it and it's working. I know doctors who actually are taking that themselves. They're taking zinc, taking hydroxychloroquine, and they're taking an antibiotic. Think about that. But they're not giving it to the people. They're telling them to stay home because there's nobody making any big bucks on it. I think, but I checked 60 zinc tablets, 20 milligrams each, I think they were, is $16.95. So there's a profit actually worked into that, but it's not exorbitant. It's not a $10,000 or $5,000 price that everybody wants. It's not like this magic vaccine. And so you just, when you look at what they tell you to do and how granted, maybe all these top world experts did not know what they were talking about. They were grasping at straws as well, not sure what was happening. But to whiffle waffle, do this, do that, do this, do that, do other things. And so I think the lesson we've learned then is you don't let those people control your economy. I mean, they don't understand their own field of expertise. Why would you turn them into the economy and shutting everybody down? So that's where I think there's something insidious going on, and a lot of us maybe just aren't recognizing it. So that's a long preamble, but getting back to the dentist, it was nothing about the dentist or the dentist staff. They're dear people. It was about the procedures. And the procedure if it doesn't make sense, I mean, why not question it? Why just do what people tell you to do? That's, as you take a real deep look at this, it's social engineering to its best. And if they're going to have people under these crazy regulations and rules for a year and a half, how many people are going to be mentally screwed up that aren't already? Just think about it at the dentist. I have no problem going to a dentist. I don't have any fear factor there. But some people do. And just think of the person who is nervous about going to the beginning, to begin with. And they have all of these regulations they now got to follow. All these stupid procedures they've got to do. Those people are going to go nuts. It's sometimes it's not about the well-being of the person. It's a well-being of a bureaucratic sort of system of rules, and that's not what it should be about. So that's enough of that on the dentist. If you don't get it, well, let's give you a head of shake, because that's what I was talking about, and we'll leave that as it may. But I'm thinking it's there's been a couple. I put a couple of links. Gal from Yugoslavia talking. And you got to look at these things and stand back and use your own mind and really critically start analyzing things. Is she a plant? Is this somebody's script? But you go back and look at what happened in Yugoslavia, in Bosnia and Serbia. You go back and look at that. I know people who served there, some two duties there, and still sort of mentally skewed for what they went through. And what they did in that country is, and again, this is not just this lady speaking. Go back and look at it. I mean, they turned the people against people, much like we're doing in North America. People against the police, blacks against whites, all sorts of craziness, get everybody arguing, create chaos. And then the twits who want to control the place come on in with a solution. And the solution's not pretty. You just look in any of those countries. People, and again I say a key to it is, where does Soros hanging his hat? Because he has been in several countries funding this sort of shit. And that's how he makes his money, crashing currencies, doing goofy crap that, I don't know, maybe he learned that when he was picking teeth out of dead people in the Second World War as a teenager. Picking gold fillings out. I mean, the man is, wherever he goes, there's problems and there's trouble. And so that's, when you look here, that is what's happening here. So I don't care how many rules these people are putting out. You've got to question this thing. Is there some sense to it, or is it nonsensical? Is it a rule for the sake of having a rule? And it's like painting white circles on green grass, like they're doing in Ontario. It's total asinine. And yet people, like trained dogs, go lay in those circles, sit in those circles. If you sat between the circles, you'd still be distancing, but people won't do that. They sit right in the circle. I mean, we're obedient. We're being engineered to follow whimsical rules and regulations. And a journalist, a radio journalist and broadcaster, a well-respected person, was on saying, well, when we said we shouldn't be smoking in the office, everybody got annoyed, so we can't live with that. He said it didn't take long before it became socially unacceptable to smoke in public. So now if you see somebody smoking in public, you're going to say, hey, something wrong with that person, and you're going to move them on out. He said it won't be long before the same thing will happen with masks. If you see a person without a mask, the community will turn on that person. Now think about that statement. Here's a brilliant journalist figuring it's going to be all right for everybody to have to wear a mask indefinitely from here on in. Yeah, whether you're outside, in your house, wherever. It's sort of stupid. It's nonsensical. It makes no sense. So are you going to just follow that and say, yeah, he's right, yeah, we're all going to wear a mask. We'll put visors on and goggles and all this sort of stuff, whether you need them or you don't. And when we should have been doing this in January, February, we weren't. Our government was flying people in from Wuhan, flying people in all over the place. I mean, Trump shut down some flights and was criticized for it by his party, by the other party, by journalists, by everybody. I think sometimes we're late to the party sometimes. And so with another thing that keeps coming up, what I call is the Wuhan waltz. People say it's not the Wuhan's fault. Who is saying it's Wuhan's fault? I am saying that's where it started. And as far as we know, that's where it started. And all research is sort of pointing to that. Where did it start? It started in a lab in the States. A guy out of Harvard fiddling around who was working with the people in Wuhan, the people out of Winnipeg, the lab there. I mean, there's a connection. And way back, I pulled those connections off, and people thought I was crazy. This doesn't happen that way. This came from a bat. It's, I'm not sure. Maybe you don't remember that, but it's only 6 months ago. And it's all intriguing. We're being socially engineered, re-engineered, and people don't realize it. They're not thinking. They're just sort of going along with whatever. And let's say it's not to say that this isn't can be a serious health problem for people who have a compromised immune system. It's not saying that. There is a danger there. But what the hell are we doing? Most of our cases in Canada, deaths are at senior homes. The people who we should be looking after. And where did they come from? It came from the workers. A lot of the cases were workers bringing and spreading it around from home to home. Think about that. Were the workers all sick? No. But they were carriers. And I'm looking at some stats out of Florida. 40% of the deaths in Florida, new deaths in Florida, are in senior homes. Is this eugenics at work? Who knows? I mean, so people should be questioning that. The people we should be looking after, we're not. I mean, the numbers are showing we're not. And so don't give some, we'd rather give some kid going for a walk on the beach where he's not supposed to be with nobody else around except a couple of seals, give him a ticket for doing that. Harass them. It's easier. It's crazy. So all of these rules that they're passing down, we should be questioning them. It's in Canada we have all that sort of thing happening. We have this great scandal that people are saying, well, he's handed money out to everybody, so it's a pandemonium. It's a lot of pressure. You got to give them cut them some slack. What do you mean, cut them some slack? That is their job, to work under pressure. That's why they were elected to. They weren't elected just to go through fun times. If there's a disaster, if there's emergencies, that's where they're supposed to come to the fore. And when the people you elect don't do that, you have to call them on that. It's like in your own whatever work you do. If you're slacking around and saying, "Well, I was under too much pressure," I mean, all your foibles and all the mistakes you made, are they written off because of that? Of course not. And so with government, we have to hold their feet to the fire as well. I mean, they can dance around and give us all sorts of political jargon they want. But, I mean, it's just not the way to do things. You don't put money in your own pocket just because you're giving somebody else relief from not having a job. They would have a job if the governments wouldn't have shut it all down. And it's not the governments really that shut it all down. It's the medical bureaucrats who didn't know what the hell they were doing at first. And still don't. Just think about it. Wear masks in a heat wave. Sort of stupid. Sort of stupid. I mean, I can see if you're in a big crowd, well, that's different. But I mean, just everybody walking around, riding in their cars with masks on. And I'm seeing that in the small town, city I live in. And I wonder what the hell's the matter with people. When you should have been wearing a mask, you weren't. But another thing that's sort of crazy, they do not tell you where these cases are. We know there's 14 cases on Haida Gwaii, based because the community of Haida Gwaii announced that and created their own shutdown. But our provincial government will not tell you. They don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, so you don't know where the cases are. They just wear a mask wherever you are. There may not be any cases where you're living, and you're doing all this crazy protocol for nothing. So why do that? Question these people, these politically correct people. When you get down to states, it's even worse. I mean, how many people were shot at protests this weekend, or just from crime going crazy? And it's mostly in Democratic states. Think about that. Democratic governors, Democratic mayors, Democratic judges. It's crazy. Last night, when I got in, I decided to watch. There was a young film guy going out to film the Seattle protests. So I thought I should watch this, and it was a whole bunch of boring nothing, a lot of foul language and people screaming, and so I watched it for about 3 hours. And the part I watched, there was not a whole lot of violence. There was a couple agitators arrested, a couple of loudmouths on microphones, on megaphones, saying, "Okay, guys, let's all line up and behind this loud drummer, and we'll just march through. They can't stop us because they can't do this. There's a law." Apparently the city council had passed a law. You couldn't use pepper spray, you couldn't use force, you couldn't use anything as you were a police officer with all these clowns if they wanted to sort of charge you. So this fellow on the megaphone was trying to rile everybody up. And I found it interesting because most of the people didn't. Some people started walking away. So at the time I watched, it was loud, raucous, and you could see there were several people under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or whatever. One guy was running around the field taking his pants off. Some lady was a little bit goofy, and you could tell she was sort of high on something. But for the most part, people just sort of watching. They were all geared up with helmets and goggles and masks and whatever, but didn't see any major violence, except two of the agitators at the beginning who were pulled out and arrested. They were off, I guess, pushing at cops and whatever. So you can't touch me, I can touch you. And just think about it. That whole council who passed that law for Seattle, well, they should have given them each a police helmet and a baton and said, "You go on the line." I mean, it's easy for idiots to create all these regulations and rules and then expect someone to look after their fat butts. It sort of doesn't work that way. It's sort of crazy. But I noticed that that's what I say, politicians have got to be in this thing. Because why would they do that otherwise? Politicians have to be in on this. And corporations, obviously, they all got to be in. I see a lot of the professional sporting owners are starting to kowtow to these slogans and slang things. And I think it's utterly despicable. It's a disgrace. If you care about lives, let's go do something about it. If you care about chaos, well, that's crazy. But anyway, that's about all for now on a Sunday. As always, I'll put a couple of links in the description end. And if anybody tells you I'm knocking a dentist, tell them to bugger off. I wasn't doing that. If you don't understand the context of things or what someone is saying, well, that's what happens when you're not educated, I suppose. Anyway, take care. Bye for now.